broadcast available for the council website. The Integration Joint Board, the Joint Data Controller, the Inverclyde Council and the NHS Greater Glasgow Clyde under the General Data Protection Regulations and the Data Protection Act of 2018. This meeting was broadcast and recorded to fulfill a public task obligation to enable members of the public to observe the democratic process. Data collected in this remote meeting will be retained in accordance with Council's published policies and available through the Council website. Members of the Integration Joint Board are reminded they should follow IJB's established meeting protocol, including the round use of chat facility and the comments made in the chat facility are available to all participants in the meeting, which may include members of the public who have also received their invite to this meeting. Thank you. Number 1 agenda is apology substituted declaration. Diane.
We have the following apology for absence. We have an apology from Dr. McDonald. Chair now move to a roll call before asking for declarations of interest. And the following members please indicate if they are present at the meeting either in person or remotely. Councillor Moran.
In the chamber.
Alan Cowan.
Yeah, in the chamber.
Councillor McCluskey.
In the chamber.
Councillor Twin. Present chamber. Councillor Reynolds. Anne Cameron Burns.
Remotely.
David Gould.
Remote.
Dr. Rebecca Metcalf.
I am remotely.
Kate Rocks.
In the chamber.
Jonathan Hines.
Can you hear it, Jonathan? Right. We can't see you.
Craig Gibbon.
Present in the chamber.
Laura Moore.
Yeah. I think you're on mute, Laura. Right. Perfect.
Dr. Chris Jones.
Remotely.
Gemma Eardley. Diana McCrory. In the chamber. Darlene Elliott. Margaret Tate.
Present in the chamber, excuse me.
Heather Davis.
Present in the chamber.
Stephen McLaughlin.
Present in the chamber.
Are there any declarations of interest?
Thank you. Before we move on to agenda 2, you should have received on your table its financial board report for the 4th. It's agenda item number 4. This is the very latest update. I know that this is the 3rd update we've had, so you should have received this. If you're all comfortable with that, you can process okay. Agenda item 2 is a minute of the meeting of Inverclyde Joint Board on the 25th of March. Everybody got a copy of that minute? Is anybody no, quite happy to accept the minute? Agenda item number 3, non-board membership of the Integrated Joint Board, carer representative. And
Thank you. The purpose of this report is to ask members of the IJE to agree the appointment of Heather Davis as the carers representative member of the IJE to replace Christina Boyd. And I just brought to members' attention, there's a typo in recommendation at 2.1, subparagraph 2, which should read, agrees the appointment of Heather Davis as the carers representative, non-voting member on the Inverclyde Integration Joint Board. Thank you, Chair.
thank you. Agree, Heather's appointment. Lincoln. Lynn,
Yeah, Heather, sorry, I do agree. So, I'm not sure that's good news or bad news for you. So, thanks. First of all, I just say thanks for volunteering. I know it can look daunting, especially when you get papers this thick and it starts to look a bit panicky. Yeah, so I just called my question on a service shoot. Did we used to have a service shooting rep, but we always just had a carer rep? So we used to have both. It was just that, you know, when I was reading it, I was thinking, oh, that's very confusion, and I couldn't understand if we did have
Chief
both.
Officer,
teams or just one.
That's
Your voice acts as the service
the
user.
service user.
Right, okay, that
Heather's the
clarifies.
carer.
Great, thank you.
Al Cowan.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, in fact, welcome, Heather. Maybe the members are agreed it might be helpful just to record a vote of thanks to our outgoing member, Christina, for the commitment she's made over a number of years. I think she's made a substantial commitment to the decisions we've made and brought a voice that's necessary. So maybe we just capture that for the minute if members are happy. I think it's an oversight if we didn't do that.
Yeah, take a good minute. Well, thanks to Christina. I mean, I don't know if I should declare an interest because I know Heather as well. And at one time I wrote into doing burn supper and it was the toast of lasses. And the person replied to lasses was Heather. I'm still black and blue, I have to say, after all these years. So, well, hope you're going to be all gent on the rest time.
I promise that.
Welcome, Heather. So, item number 4 is the financial model report, and it's a new one. Great.
Thank you very much, previous Chair. First of all, my apologies about the late issue with this paper. I can obviously get an update. You can hear about the new change that we had. So this is our period order monitoring report, and this is our standard finance statement we bring forward to the BNGB, and it covers a number of the areas. These are mainly our current 23-24 projected outturn position and a current capital position and reserves position. This paper also highlights the current position of the Transformation Fund. As at period 11, we're currently projecting overspend of just over £1 million within the overall IJB. The social care budget is projecting overspend of £710,000, and the health element of the budget is projecting an overspend of £314,000. Obviously, by year end, we will use smoothing reserves required to bring this position back to break even. So moving into some of the detail, children and families are currently projecting a 3.49 million in overspend, mainly due to residential placements and child respite overspends at period 11. And at this moment, we're planning on using £500,000 for smoothing reserve to help this overall position. As we've mentioned, Jonathan and his team are currently doing a thorough service review in this area, so we expect this to improve as we move forward with this. This is mainly offset by underspends in older persons, physical disabilities, assessment care management, and mental health underspends. On the health side of the budget, mental health inpatients is projected to be overspent by 1.753 million, and prescribing over by 1.4. This is mainly offset by vacancies across all of our main areas. At present, we have not used our reserves in health, but we will review this at year end, part of the year end process, and draw down reserves as required. Moving on to the capital section, section 4 shows the current capital position. At this point, we're not showing significant spend for this financial year, and this is likely to be incurred next financial year, especially with the big projects such as the Community Hub project. And that's the main reason we reissued an reverse to this report. recent information from the council have indicated that we're requesting to use £200,000 of a £500,000 allocation for fixtures and fittings to be put to the overall project. This is a nil sum game to us in sense. We do feel that the remaining allocation that we've got for plant fixtures and fittings will be more than enough to cover that, so it's not any additional spend that it's asking for. It's just a reallocation of spend between various lines. Appendix 5 shows our overall earmarked reserves position and shows we started the year with 24.262 million and expect to finish the year with 18.199 million based on our current projections. As is always, happy to take any questions anyone might have.
Any questions? Okay. Arthur.
Thanks, Robert. Just a couple of questions, Craig. So specifically, first of all, on the alcohol and drugs recovery service and the underspend there, would you be able just to narrate a little bit more why we're so underspent, like 32% that period 11 against the budget? And a second, more general question about the budget as a whole. So the financial challenge in health, we know, is significant this year. The latest, the budget for this year for GGC is talking about a £229 million financial challenge, 5% savings, which is unprecedented even with the cuts that we've experienced in recent years. And it was mentioned at the last health board meeting that every piece of expenditure and every service would have to be reviewed in health. I'm just wondering what, if any, discussions there have been with NHS Greater Glasgow Clyde about that review and how those reviews might impact on the health side. And just very final question, just comparing the kind of social care position to the health position in Appendix 2, the variances, I know that overall the variance ends up at 1% on the social care side, the variance within services is quite large. And I'm just wondering why the social care variances are so much kind of, there's so much more variance in social care than there is in health more generally across a kind of number of different areas. Thanks.
That's okay. So the variances within the social care, you're correct. I think that's because that's where some of our biggest features that we have. It's families sitting with £3.5 million, so that probably that is one of our absolute number one priorities we're looking at as we're going forward, and it has been a bit of a historical issue, so it is a primary concern. With relation to the other ones, I think we've mentioned that, and the health side continues to be prescribing, which is also an area which we're looking at, and it's one of our savings initiatives that we're taking forward. The mental health inpatient side of things has seen a little bit of improvement in the last couple of months, so we're a little bit more optimistic in that. But obviously, that's something we're going to have to be looking at in more detail as we go forward. In terms of the, sorry, can you mention the second question that was health on?
The 229 million challenge health board wide, and at the last health board meeting, it was discussed that every area of expenditure would need to be examined. I'm just wondering what the impact of that will be for us locally.
So we've already been given our budget for the health board, and that's factored into our overall budget we're looking for this year. So, but as is the case with what we're dealing with within the financial challenges, we'll be looking at as part of our savings programme that we've got, and initiatives we're looking at that side of things. In terms of the conversation with the health board, we're obviously remaining regular conversations within the moment. In terms of the alcohol and drug side of things, Kate, you've got to say a few words.
Yeah, I'll come back on the conversations that we've had with the health board. So Craig and I met with Jane Grant, who is the chief executive, as you know, who's the chief officer, and they were happy is the word, content with their financial plans moving forward, and that there will be regular updates from chief officers and chief finance officers, and are very regular because of the impact, not necessarily for Inverclyde, but for some of the other HSAPs where the financial challenge could be one for the board to step into that frame
So they were content about how we were taking things forward. And obviously, they would probably give an update around a programme board and how they were looking at that and the cross-system working that we need to do within it, because it's not just a matter of impact for social care. Social care has an impact in health, so we need to have to mitigate some of the risk around that, particularly over things like our management structure, our pharmacy. Our pharmacy wasn't put up as a saving per se, other places have, because we felt that the market was too volatile to provide that level, but it doesn't mean to say that we're not wanting efficiencies out at the board are already making decisions about certain types of drugs that they don't think have any clinical effectiveness, as you know, and that we hope that we will see a reduction in our spend accordingly as being part of that bigger system approach. Katrina is on the line, and we missed her in the roll call earlier on, who is the interim head of mental health. And Katrina can pick up the ADP, but what I'd like to say with the ADP, a lot of it is to do with us going out and getting posts and the drag just to get people in posts. First of all, identify suitably qualified people to go into alcohol and drugs. Mental health is another area that we really have significant issues recruiting to, and that is part of the story. It's not the whole story. So, Katrina has also done a bit of work with the hospital in terms of use of bank, and agency, and that we don't use agency. We've moved into a position that we're just using bank to cover the shifts. But she might want to add something there. Katrina, I don't know if you want to come in and add.
Yeah, I think probably just to add to that, we are taking forward a number of initiatives within inpatients to reduce. We've reduced the agency to 0. We want to continue to reduce the bank usage. So we're looking at different initiatives that are taking place across the whole of GGNC, and we've offered to be pilot test sites for that, which I'm hoping will reduce the number of bank staff that we're using. And the other thing we're doing within our inpatients is we're going to recruitment for a discharge coordinator, which again, if we can increase the patient flow by using the discharge coordinator, it helps to manage the activity within the wards, and that in itself helps to reduce the number of additional staff that we need within our ward areas. I think Kate's absolutely right. The challenge we have in terms of recruitment is extreme. We've only got the one. We participate on an annual basis with the GGNC wide nurse recruitment process, but that means that we have to hold vacancies to go through that process in order to allocate posts to, for instance, newly qualified nurses, and that doesn't happen until October. So we hold a proportion of our posts back to ensure that we can attract and offer choices to our newly qualified nurses to ensure that we get them into our employment rather than going elsewhere. But I think obviously nationally there is a shortage of nursing staff, and again, and medical staff. Again, we're looking at alternative ways of managing some of our activities, some of our business, looking at different roles that might be more attractive to people who want to come and work within Inverclyde. And so we're taking that forward with our medical and nursing colleagues across the board area and locally within Inverclyde itself. I'm happy to take any questions.
Fine, thanks.
Well, anyone else?
Thanks, Chair. Maybe just pick up on that last point very briefly, because it's a point I've made consistently over time, so it's not new to you. We consistently underspend in this area. We know why. We're told it's because you struggle to recruit. At the same time, Inverclyde has a specific and entrenched problem in this area, and I wonder if, as we go forward, it might be helpful to take this as a separate item on the agenda and have a stronger look at what's actually going on. It would give, I think it's, did you say Katrina? Katrina, a chance maybe to explain a bit more detail what's going on in this area and give us a greater assurance. I'm just concerned that Inverclyde, often the highlight around drugs and alcohol is not a good story. And when you tie that to the fact that we've not been able to spend our budget year on year on this, that we probably need a greater understanding of what the difficulties are and some of the things that are going on. So maybe just an opportunity to reflect on whether we should look at this afresh as a single item. Looking at the Chief Officer Coleman.
Yeah, I'm happy for
Or
us.
report through your Chief Officer report.
Yeah.
Something we can actually get a bit more teeth into and understand.
And it might be what we want to do it through the audit committee.
Happy.
Okay, to take it through the audit committee so that you're able to do that deep dive. I mean, it's a bit more nuanced because obviously it's not just about recruitment and retention. It's also about commission services and the amount of services that are out there. And the amount of investment that's been put into alcohol and drug partnerships and that over a very short period of time coming out of a pandemic when we haven't been able to develop an infrastructure around that. But I do want to assure the IGB that our relationship and growing the third sector, particularly our lived experience and our recovery, is a significant help to us. And that Katrina and I are very clear that we want to do more than that. So Katrina's put her hand back up because she's quite passionate about that work that the third sector does. So they are able to step in the frame, and we know that in many respects that statutory services do a really, really good job, but you can't beat the relationships that there is there in Inverclyde. So Katrina, do you want to come back in?
Yeah, just to say, the issue about some of the underspend being related to some of our commission services is true. It's taken us a while. We got some money allocated from CORA, and we're now in partnership with Turning Point Scotland to deliver residential rehab and with a much improved process to be able to identify and get people into residential rehab at the earliest opportunity. I also just wanted to say that we've recently just been through our assessment for our medication assisted treatment standards, and our services, both within the service and across the partnership, we're delivering on green from standards 1 to 5, and we've got a provisional green already for standards 6 to 10, and we're not even being assessed on that yet. So and we continue to develop relationships with our partners to make sure that we are delivering the best possible pathway to recovery, and also to deliver the best points of access into our service. So I think I'm absolutely happy to bring something to the audit committee, but we are working hard.
Chair, thanks. So my wider point is really about the financial report. I mean, I think it's difficult to be a gold star when you're overspent, but we come in 0.5 of 1% on our budget. So we 99.5% of our budget, we're almost there. So a million overspend is just 0.5 of 1% of our budget. I think that's a remarkable achievement, frankly, in the climate that we've gone through last year. And I think that's down to the stewardship of Craig and the leadership of Kate to get us to a point where we are overspent. We did have a plan, but we are very, very close to managing our budget on the line. So I think that's something that shouldn't just go past without being recognised. It does mask, as you well know, in the report, some quite sizable overspends, which Craig has touched on. And again, I just remind ourselves that we can't get out of jail here, but we really will have to tackle those in the coming year or two. I know there's work going on in children and families. Applaud that. I'm keen to see how that goes on. I know that we struggle to do much in prescribing, but we should always challenge ourselves to find out if there's any more we can be done. That's quite a sizable overspend. And the mental health inpatient she spoke about, those are the three big ones. And I don't think the board should take its eye off of those, because the only reason we're getting over the line is because we've got significant underspends in different parts of our budget. But those systemic challenges will continue to exist unless we struggle to death to do something with them. So we will have to tackle those. I know there's work going on. But I think the key point is a remarkable achievement in the current climate to get just 0.51% over budget, and the fact that we've got a smoothing reserve to deal with that. So thank you.
Any other member? Well, I would just say, I really appreciate the new community hub is finally already assisted in a long drawn out process over a number of years, which I've been involved in from start. I have to say, I know she was held up because of what for this, and so I hope the season's over. We can see a brick put in there because long overdue, I have to say. I think Alton makes a good point about, you know, the drug and alcohol section. The ADT does an awful lot of good work, but maybe we don't always know about the work that's going on with ADT because we are higher up the student level. In fact, the correct word for it. But I would say that as an undeniable fact that Glasgow and Dundee are really places bigger now with drug tests. And that's the whole of Europe. And so that is a real problem. And I think it's right. We really should, it's difficult to show an underspend in that area when it looks like we're doing so badly internationally and in terms of Scotland. So I think it's correct that we should follow up on this. Alan says that, you've issue with it. I think it's something we really need to keep around because at the end of the day, facts speak louder than words sometimes. Unfortunately, in our case, that seems to be the thing. Although there's a lot of good work to be done, so thank you for that.
Robert, sorry.
Sorry.
Just I've got a note for Sandra saying she's got a problem with her home broadband, so she'll not be able to just send in apologies. Anyway, it's a big long message about technical stuff. I don't want to use it. If somebody else can make it and send apologies.
Oh, yes. Apologies to you. Item 5 is the role in actions. Craig.
Thank you very much to yourself, Chair. This again is a very much list. This highlights all the new papers and basically a plan that we've got in terms of papers coming back to the IGIB for the next year. As you see in the second part of the papers, there's a lot of detail and a lot of different streams and areas we're looking at. So it's a standard report going forward every cycle, but it's always happy to take any questions and hands on it.
Martin.
Thanks, Robert. Just on the kin care scheme, I think we were meant to have the report today.
It's in chief officers.
It's in within. Okay, thank you.
Anybody else, any questions on actions? Nothing in the chat. Right, thank you for that. Item number 6 is Inverclyde report of the Inverclyde Action Wellbeing, and I think Peter White is going to give a presentation. Peter.
Thank you. Yes, thank you very much for inviting me here today. So we've brought the update of the Inverclyde report of the Health and Wellbeing Survey here today. I prepared a presentation. I shared that with the Secretariat. Was that possible to show that on the screen as well as so that we can all see that? But yeah, so basically it's the results of the GGC Health and Wellbeing Survey with a particular focus on the Inverclyde results, and as well as sharing the findings, some of which are really quite challenging. It's really also an opportunity to mobilise around what that means for priorities for health and for public health in particular, for GGC as a whole and Inverclyde in particular. So if we go to the first slide, please. So we're probably all very familiar that health and inequalities are really influenced by a huge range of factors, and that goes anything from the physical environment and individual lifestyle factors, but also what we do with our health and social care services, how strong our communities are, living and working conditions, all of which is underpinned and really significantly influenced by general social conditions. Next slide, please. We also know that our population and our population structure continues to change, and that has implications for what we need to provide for our population. So the GGC population overall is growing faster than the population for Scotland, but we also know that inward migration really plays a big role in that for GGC as a whole to compensate what we're seeing in that our death rates are actually outstripping our birth rates. And that natural change is actually what is most influential for what we're seeing for Inverclyde, for a population that has been declining and is projected to continue to decline. We also know that we have an aging population, and again, for Inverclyde, we now have 22% of the Inverclyde population aged 65 years or older, and that's above the GGC average. We also know that we have a very diverse population, and whilst Inverclyde has still got a lower proportion, or the highest proportion of our population in Inverclyde remains white Scottish, but the latest census data is yet to be released. So what we're seeing here on the screen is from the 2011 census. So I would expect an increase in the ethnic diversity, and that is important because we know that our minority ethnic groups still have bigger health challenges and worse outcomes than our white Scottish population. We also have a high proportion of our population in Inverclyde living in the most deprived SIMD quintile, so it's quintile 1. But also maybe worth pointing out that in terms of the proportion of the population living in quintile 4 and 5, so the more affluent of this side of the spectrum, is in Inverclyde still higher than, for example, West Dun. Next slide, please. What we do know is that if we look at life expectancy and healthy life expectancy, which is an overarching measure of population health that we're using as a high-level summary, we know that the story hasn't been very positive over the last few years. So even in the middle of the last decade, our progress in terms of increasing life expectancy slowed down. And actually, over the last 2 years, that has been declining. What we also know is that that is, in the main, driven by worse outcomes for those of our population living in the most deprived areas. So that kind of difference in life expectancy and healthy life expectancy is opening up. What you can see on the graph on the right-hand side is the first graph for females and the second graph for males. So differences in life expectancy still by sex, and what you can see even more distinctly there is how that happens for our HSCPs across GGC by how affluent they are. So you'll see that Inverclyde is following that overall trend, both for males and females, and it's grouping with our less affluent areas. COVID also contributed to that kind of decline in life expectancy over the last 2 years, but also that increase in difference between those most and least deprived. So the most deprived areas saw the highest mortality from COVID as well. With the next slide, please. So we now come to the first data points from the Health and Wellbeing Survey, and this is a survey that is different to the kind of depth of data that we have available across other areas of Scotland. For Inverclyde, we've got over 1,000 people responded to this survey. This is the first survey since COVID, so this is giving us a first impression really of what our population is reporting back themselves on their self-perceived health. And unfortunately, what we're seeing, well, we've suspected that already anyway, so in that sense, it's not a surprise, but this is giving us hard data back, that we're seeing quite significant decline in general physical well-being and also even more so in mental health indicators. And also what we know is that in general, those indicators are showing a worse picture for Inverclyde than GGC overall. And again, there is that pattern by deprivation here. So what we know is that the proportion with a positive view of physical health have declined since 2017-18, and that's a steeper decline in Inverclyde than GGC overall, and the same goes and is even more pronounced for our mental health and well-being. What we do know, and in that instance, GGC overall and Inverclyde are very closely set together, is that approximately a quarter of our population are showing self-reported mental health indicators that are indicating depression. On the good news there, though, an area which is really quite important for mental health is how much of control people are feeling of their life decisions and decisions that are affecting their life. And that proportion for Inverclyde is actually higher than for GGC overall. We go on to the next slide. So we do know that we have an increase in the proportion of our population living with long-term conditions which are influencing and affecting how they can go about their day-to-day activities. And that is approximately a third of our population overall, and higher than that in Inverclyde. On the left-hand side, the table that you're seeing there are the top 5 conditions for women and men that are influencing overarching, it's called disability adjusted life years. So that is the burden of disease on our population. And you can see some of the factors that are cropping up on both instances, and that is, we do know that drug use plays a big role. We do know that mental health in the form of depression plays a big role. Ischemic heart disease plays a big role. COPD, and on the side of women also Alzheimer and dementia, and the Alzheimer and dementia coming in for women in particular is also linked to actually higher life expectancy in women, so a higher proportion of women in the older age groups, and that's how dementia and Alzheimer makes it into the top 5 for women as well. The other aspect to point out here is that we know that the proportion with a long-term condition affecting their daily lives is increasing, but also really significant for what we're seeing for our services, the proportion of the population who have one condition which requires treatment has increased quite substantially since before the pandemic as well. So for GGC overall, that sits at 46%. And next slide, please. For Inverclyde, that is even higher. So for Inverclyde, we can see that on the left-hand side is the limiting conditions again. But in the bottom there, you see that just over 50% of respondents in Inverclyde said that they're currently receiving treatment for at least one condition. And that is then that kind of high proportion of the population requiring our health and social care services is then also affecting how services are perceived. So we know for GGC overall, there's a drop in positive perception across most of our public services, with GP and doctors overall having the steepest decline, followed by public transport. Schools are the only highlight in here. People's positive perception of schools has actually increased, and the same is true for Inverclyde, where again the steepest drop has been in perception of GP and doctors, also our services for Inverclyde, and then the public transport again in terms of that decline of positive views. We go to the next slide, please. And again, we kind of covered this at the start. We do know that poverty makes a big difference to how people can lead their lives, and it really makes leading a healthy lifestyle more difficult, and it can make prioritising decisions that are positive for health nigh on impossible. And again, you can see that reflected clearly in the graphs here in terms of we're seeing overarchingly a decline in smoking across GGC and for Inverclyde, which is really great. That decline has slowed a bit over recent years, and there's starting to be a bit of a gap opening up between Inverclyde and the rest of GGC. What we're seeing also is that we have seen a decline in fruit and vegetable consumption, and that is really a high-level indicator for people's diet and how healthy that is. And what you're seeing there in the bottom right-hand side is really part of what's driving that, is people who are not able to afford a healthy diet. So we've actually got a doubling in people who have got problems with affording their food. So that is a really stark finding from this. In terms of alcohol consumption, there's actually in Inverclyde lower proportion, slightly lower proportion than GCC overall, that have an audit score indicating risky alcohol consumption. But out of those who do drink alcohol, there is still a significant proportion who are binge drinking as well. Next slide, please. So this is really what we are thinking about then, that these modifiable factors increase then your risk of chronic conditions, and that is it's good news and bad news at the same time. It's really similar factors that are influencing your risk for cardiovascular diseases, for cancers, for Alzheimer's and dementia as well. So if we can improve on how we facilitate people to reduce the risk factors on those sides, then that really will have implications across a wide range of chronic diseases. Go to the next slide, please. So this is really now where we're coming into the so what elements of what do we actually need to do and where are the priorities. And we all know that the foundations for physical and mental health are built in childhood. The first 1,000 days are often coming up as headline figures, so this is all the way from conception through to the early years, and support in those years is really instrumental in terms of setting children onto a good path in life. So what you're seeing in the graph in the bottom left is that over the last years, and this predates the pandemic, mental health of our children and young people has declined, and that is really just showing this in terms of accepted referrals to CAMHS, and there it's in particular young girls, so teenage girls who are showing increased requirements for referrals. We also know that we have a high proportion of our children who are obese when they're entering primary school, and again this links back to what we discussed about food poverty and affording a healthy diet, as well as facilitating physical activity. And then the last graph on the right shows that really is focusing in on data that we're collecting through our health visiting pathway, which is really important for supporting children in these very early years to identify any neurodevelopmental concerns early on and to tie them into the right support. Go to the next slide, please. Again, the financial constraints and the impacts of the cost of living crisis have been felt across all of our populations. This is not restricted just to our less affluent population, but it is for the less affluent population where the support to tie them into financial support as best as possible is really important. And linked closely to that is broadening digital access, which both in terms of how we provide our services, is important that people can access the digital services that we provide, but actually digital access is also really closely linked to financial benefits in themselves. If we go to the next slide, please. Again, what we're seeing here is that healthy and sustainable places overall creates the conditions for a healthy life, and strengthening our communities and how they come together can actually help us reduce health inequalities. What we did see over the course of the pandemic is that some of the social capital indicators have been declining since before the pandemic. And again, that's around how the pandemic has affected all of us. If we go to the next slide, please. So what you can see here is that this is a good news and bad news story for Inverclyde overall. And in terms of the bad news story is that Inverclyde follows the trend for GCC overall, where more people are feeling socially isolated. There's a decline in people feeling a valued member of their community. But what you can also see is that GGC is actually tracking more positively than GTC overall. So there is a really strong bedrock here in terms of the community. But we can't deny that that has declined over the course of the pandemic and the cost of living crisis as well. So we can't lose sight of that. Next slide, please. So we do know that delivering health services online digitally has come on in leaps and bounds during the pandemic, and that has actually created huge benefits for a lot of people in terms of being able to access services remotely. But we also need to remember that there is a significant proportion of our population who are not currently accessing the internet. So for GGC overall, that's 1 in 11 people, and for Inverclyde, that is 1 in 10 people who currently use the internet. And that proportion is much higher for those people who probably need our services the most. So our 75 plus year old population, 45% of individuals are not accessing the internet currently. And also we're seeing lower access in our more deprived areas, and also lower proportions of the population who have a disability or a limiting condition are accessing the internet, and really enabling internet access, both in terms of financial aspects, looking at physically enabling people to access the internet in common spaces, but also looking at upskilling people in terms of knowledge of how to access the internet is really important for access to health, as well as that broader access to digital I've talked about before. Next slide, please. So that's really covered what I was going to cover about that kind of overarching picture. And those priority areas that I've started to draw out do align really closely with what is in the kind of overarching long-term public health strategy and the areas that we have already been working on quite closely over the last few years. And if you go to the next slide, please. That just highlights for reference later on how the priorities for health we're drawing out here are reflected in our commitments under the annual delivery plan for GGC and our overarching strategies. If you go to the next slide, please. This was mapping to the 6 big actions from the strategic plan, which was refreshed for 23-24, looking at how these priorities already map quite closely to those 6 big actions as well. And if we look at the next slide, please. So really what we're needing to do with these findings now is look at sharing those findings as widely as possible, and this is not just amongst ourselves, but also with our third sector partners in our communities to see how that resounds with them, get people involved in really ensuring that we can mobilise the entire population, because we can't do this by ourselves. And this is the important part, is to get that partnership approach to really building and innovating on how we can support within the financial constraints that we have to really build on those priorities for public health. Go to the next slide, please. And we recognise that public health is everyone's business, and we realise that this is a challenge, but there are really good, innovative, good news stories in here as well already. So in terms of improving people's self-care and empowering them, so we've got high numbers of referrals across GGC overall to Live Active. And that's a really positive story in terms of people getting involved in that. We've got our youth services, that innovative technology, and really drawing out here that kind of partnership working for Inverclyde, the kind of really positive story there around Pride number 5, where we're bringing in the pilots in the Fort Glasgow area, bringing together all of the different organisations in order to support families, in particular families of children under 5 years of age, and hence the under 5 aspect to that, to support families in a whole systems way to enable them to have more positive, healthy lifestyle for their young children. This is everything from financial inclusion to physical activity and a healthy diet, enabling them by bringing all of the partners together and creating that really tight network in order to provide that support. We go to the next slide. So I'm not going to go into these in detail now. I think the slides will be shared with the IJB afterwards as well. So people can look at that in more detail. But this is really just, again, bringing out these high level areas of priority that we've drawn out from what we've seen. So again, that's ensuring the best start in life, enabling a healthy rate, boosting mental health and well-being, concerted actions on drugs harms. And then the overarching element there around building financial security for better health, and closely linked to that, the trauma-informed responses, broadening access to digital health, and also transport to health is a really important element of access to health. And again, underpinning all of that, the strengthening of community places. I know that was a lot of information, so I'll stop here for questions.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Very comprehensive, and I think most of the messages have been, go over at the moment. So I'm going to look for a question, and I think that's a question. Like, you like a question?
Yeah, thanks, Robert. I've seen this presentation already, actually, not now more than once. I've seen it on the health board as well, and it doesn't become bluntly any less shocking the more times you see it. And while I agree with Beatrix that there is some of it in here where we can look at Inverclyde and say, okay, we're doing better than the average, we still have to accept that the average is terrible. But the average is absolutely terrible. And I think most of us those of us who live in this community will have seen it with our own eyes over the last few years, as we've seen people get sicker, struggling more, and just how difficult circumstances are for people. So what's in the report really just sums up what we've all witnessed over the last 4 or 5 years. But I think the question for us now isn't so much about what we think about what's in the pack as what are we going to actually do about it. And I think my view would be, going back to that financial report we were just talking about a moment ago, how do you even start to combat some of this when you're dealing with falling budgets? So on page 56, it talks about economic and social context. It talks about all things that we agree with, the pandemic, Brexit, the continuing effect of austerity. But we also have to be conscious of the decisions that are taken proactively to cut local government budgets, to cut health board budgets, that are going to make it more difficult to turn any of this stuff around. And any of us in this room all of us who've dealt with the IJB budget and any of us who've dealt with council budget know that when we make these cuts, it's often the people at the sharp end of what we're seeing in this report who end up having to suffer the consequences of it. So just in terms of get a full understanding of this out to the people who need to understand it, I'm looking at Kate here to see, can we do a members briefing for all the councillors on what's in here? Because I think what's also important about this is it's not just about health. The stuff in here that our education colleagues should know about, our environment and regeneration colleagues should know about, it touches every part. So can we do that? Second, how do we send out the message in the strongest possible terms that cutting £229 million from the health budget over the next year is going to make this worse? But I don't think there's any, we can pretend that it won't, but it's going to make it worse. So we're actively taking decisions, if not the health board, the government are making decisions that are meaning that this is not going to improve. And I think the question to Beatrix in terms of the health board would be, there's stuff in here which clearly shows where withdrawal of service has people see the withdrawal service and they report on it and they say it's not it's not good and it's not what they want. But how will the conclusions of this inform what's coming down the line in terms of the review of all expenditure of the health board to make sure that it's not just Inverclyde again that gets hit when services are cut? And then just a final observation in a different area. We spend a lot of time, rightly, in these meetings talking about people who are the most disadvantaged or the most elderly, and it is those people in this report who are clearly getting hit the hardest. But one thing that really struck me was the 35 to 44 age group, who have lower levels of reciprocity, trust, lowest level of feeling valued as a member of their community, lowest level of belonging, highest level of alcohol risk, and some of the highest levels of self-reported depression. We don't really talk about. I don't hear, just reflecting in the last 2 years, I don't hear a lot of discussion around this table of people in that age group, that 35 to 44, who maybe aren't at the most deprived or even the sickest. But there's clearly something going on among that age group. We could probably all come up with our own theories about why that might be happening. But what can we take from that 35 to 44 age group is reporting the kind of outcomes that they're reporting in this report? Thank you.
So if it's okay, I'll go first. Is that okay, Dave? So I agree that there needs to be an all members briefing, and I was quite struck with this report too. It coincides with their writing their new strategic plan, and you'll see that there's a sharper focus in inequalities within the strategic plan that's actually in here today that reflects some of the data that you kindly gave to me around December, January, that has had a huge influence and informed priorities moving forward. But I was intending to do that in my introduction because I felt this was really fortuitous to get this report to come with a strategic plan at the same time. We would like that out because it is about how do we build the capacity. The capacity is not just about health and social care, it's about how do we build the capacity within our communities to kind of look at and develop that level of resilience. I think that what was seen probably coming out of the pandemic, and I think it's across the board nationally, is communities aren't as resilient as they once were because we asked too much. We asked a lot from them at the point of the pandemic, and they did really well. And I suspect Inverclyde is suffering from that too. The other bits is about our relationships with our partners going forward. There's not a single anyone in this room that would disagree with this report. Actually, people would see it playing out in their own communities. I've only been here 18 months. I've worked in a lot of local authorities with a lot of areas of significant deprivation. You can see it in the high streets as you walk down the road in a way that you can, maybe. It's not so visible in other bits of JGMC, so I would completely get it. All we can do is to prioritise the resource that we've got to target the people that are the most vulnerable, the ones that most greatest need, the ones at the level of risk and that have flaws and that we know that have got the greatest inequalities. And unfortunately that's where we are at this moment in time, and that's what we've tried to reflect. So I'll hand the rest over. I'm really interested in the 35 to 44 as well, so I'll be interested to hear what Bee's got to say. I suspect they might feature in our mental health services and our addiction services and our criminal justice services, so maybe be something from here that we do a small working group and get a deep dive into what can we do different with that group, because we have a tendency to look at older people with protected characteristics, and not necessarily about the demographics, age, and that age is not an area that we focus on, or our children, so our babies. So you're quite right, Martin. So I don't know if you want to add anything, Lee?
Sure. Yeah. So on that age group in particular, that struck out to us as well in terms of it kind of working age group population. And I think, again, what's important to remember there is that what came before the pandemic. So what we already knew in terms of that kind of stagnation of life expectancy that predates the pandemic, what was causing that was premature mortality in our younger adult age group. So not necessarily the 25 to 44-year-old, but definitely our kind of under 65-year-olds in the more deprived areas, linked to what is commonly referred to as diseases of despair. So this has been linked to the impacts of austerity, really the kind of security networks breaking away, and that is where it leaves people. So I think that is important to remember as we're facing more financial constraints again, is to go into that with our eyes wide open and to focus our resources, as Kate says, on those who really cannot afford for that network to break away. The other aspect to look at in terms of 35 to 44-year-olds is, as an age group, we don't talk about them, but we do talk about them in terms of support to families. So of course, this is an age group that is likely to have children, kind of primary, secondary age groups children, as well as in terms of its parents. And I think both of those aspects are really important to remember, is that it's that family support, that support to carers, those are the individuals who are most likely to feel the current climate the harshest and to have really big effects on their health and their mental health in particular. So I don't think we've abandoned them or we have neglected them so far, but we just haven't maybe thought about them as an age group, just potentially with other hats on. And again, just I don't know that this is particularly refreshing or reassuring, but in terms of obviously any kind of review of services across the health board, much like any of the other HSCP services, will always need to come with an equality impact assessment. So that is part and parcel of what we do need to do in order to mitigate exactly what you're referring to there in terms of inequitable effects on our population, across the population, to ensure that we're not disadvantaging people through any service changes that we have to put into place.
Anyone else? Becky Metcalf.
Hi, thank you, Chair. Thank you so much, Beatrix, for bringing this today. Really appreciate it, and especially the data, particularly for our population in Inverclyde, which, as Martin said, is really quite stark in some areas. I think just, well, I'll also thank you for, I can see the overlap that's been considered in terms of the next item on the agenda, the strategic plan, and that's really welcome and I think really important, particularly that we have this information, this data to inform how we shape services at Inverclyde. So thank you. I think just as well as everything that's already been said, one thing that I'm mindful of is this digital divide, and I appreciate you because it does concern me slightly that as we head into a really resource-strapped situation across the health board over the next couple of years, that we do try and push people to what might seem like cheaper alternatives. And I just think it's really important that we are mindful that there is quite a good proportion of our population that can't necessarily or don't want to or don't have the ability to use those services easily, so that we maintain the more traditional access to services that for that particular population. So it was just a point on that, and thank you for bringing it up.
Thank you. David Gold.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Bea, for this presentation. Yeah, I would echo the sentiments of my fellow members. This is sadly, it's not surprising what we're reading, but it doesn't make it any less terrible. Very sad when you're going through, because you realise this is impacting on individuals within our community. I'm wondering, without necessarily jumping on to the next agenda item, the key element to this is, when I look at this from a prevention perspective and what we can do with regards to that, is there more that we could do as a health and social care partnership with regards to prevention? I'm thinking about, for example, the issue of obesity in under fives. Now, if we have, can't remember the statistics, but well over 20% of under fives are obese. There's a lack of activity. Something is fundamentally going wrong in our communities. So I'm wondering, is it the way we're set up, we're so focused on health and social care at the point of things going wrong? Are we in danger of losing sight of the importance of prevention? I'm also conscious of the fact that we have very limited funds, and it may well be that we simply cannot do that which we want to do in terms of prevention.
Thank you, David. Kate.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. So whilst we're a health and social care partnership, we work in partnership with others, which is our primary partner is education, amongst others. And actually, our health visitors are very focused on the Thrive Under 5 is a really good example, but health visitors would be leading the way in terms of that, our school nurses too. And actually, Jonathan's the chair of the Children's Services Planning Group. They'll just took that over from the Director of Education. So it is actually a measure for improvement within Children's Services Plan, and that there's work ongoing through education to get that message out. But again, it's a wider challenge. If you look around Inverclyde about the availability of fast foods and the cost of fresh food, it is a challenge, and we probably need to do more about how we work with partners to get that wider message out. And particularly the strategic plan will talk about how that we have to kind of look at our own level of strategic needs and target particular communities where we feel that that is of the biggest risk. So it's a really good question, David, but something that is getting taken out with here and other forums.
Thanks, Kate, and thank you, Chair.
Right.
Yeah, just maybe to add to what Kate was pointing out there around the integration of that into the health visiting pathway. So we're also integrating the Henry approach into our health visiting programme. And if you're interested in that in particular, that's kind of quite well represented online. And that's, again, really providing that whole family support to the overarching anything from the financial inclusion and the mental health support to parents, as well as then kind of thinking about how does that enable a healthy weight and healthy lifestyle for children. So that might be worth looking into if that's a particular interest.
It is, and thank you for that, Bea. I'll go and look at that.
Stephen.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Beatrice, for bringing the report and for the presentation. I thought it was really useful, it was really insightful. Just as Councillor McCluskey said, it's what you do next, and I think, what disseminating it here will be, distributed amongst the HSCP colleagues, I'm sure. I was wondering if there was something the housing sector could do as well, because there's an impact for everybody here. We need to do this together. It's clear, in order to improve it, we need to do things. Many of the housing providers will have something within their visions and value about improving lives and places. I think knowing the full extent of problems will help. So it's just an observation, really, what we can really do something together.
Yeah.
I would welcome that, Stevie. I think that's a really good point. I mean, obviously, we only come into contact with the people that we know, and that there's lots of other people out there that really we should be getting the message out to, so we would welcome to do something with you. Maybe part of our strategic, a new strategic planning group, that we might have a development session.
Yeah, thanks. I just found this utterly depressing. Sorry to be a Debbie Downer, but you're reading through, it's true what you say, because we all, a lot of us live in communities, so you do see it every day, and it's probably talking about that lack of hope and utterly despair. And I don't know, and my concern also is when we look at these things and looking at our young people and obesity and they're not eating properly, I just see it as a whole new set of responsibilities that you're going to actually send on to parents who are already struggling. And they've now got the guilt of what am I doing, and also the guilt of now I'm responsible for these children that I'll get health outcomes. But what is the solution? Because I think we can sit here and we can come up with plans, but it's sticky plasters on a huge problem that we can't solve just as an IGIB. So it has to be that wider discussion about Inverclyde as a whole, as a society. Where's the vision and hope? And where is our community's agency? Because we talk in here about doing things to people, you know, a new set of things and telling people where they're going wrong and, you know, and we're spending services that do things to people, and really our community is crying out to say we just want to help ourselves. What is the things that we can give to our community to help themselves and don't people in such a despair? And I think it's not a solution that we solely can, you know, provide a solution here. It has to go wider, and we need to get everybody together. Not just us, not just the council. Everybody needs to come together and say, Inverclyde, we need somebody to come with a plan and a vision, because we're all working individually and we're all doing a good job, but we're kidding ourselves on. This problem's bigger than this committee, and I sit in other committees and it's bigger than that committee. We need to come together and everybody to hold their hands up and say maybe we're not getting it right, but we all need to come together for the solution. You know, we're talking about transport, you know, the economy. These are bigger things to look at, and I know that's a tough ask, but I don't know who that person is or who those people are, but yeah, it's probably a cry out, because I'm sitting in here thinking we can do our best, but something bigger needs to be done. The vision needs to be a big one. Sorry, I don't think there's any.
No, thank you.
There's anything to say there.
No, I mean, personally, I think that what the partners is a big part of this, and I wrote down, you know, you shouldn't best start lining up your RS sales in early years, which I think was without saying. But also, at the end of the day, it's Inverclyde Food Bank ran out of food because it just didn't really left. So that just shows you there must be a big need out there. So my idea was, still, I've always said this, if somebody called it a food bank, they should be followed with it. We should actually what they're doing there. And again, the full entitled to the benefits they're entitled to. And the fact is clear, what else is the money going on? Now, this is Inverclyde is a contradiction in terms, because where I'm the councillor for, I've got an 8-time economy and it's food time. Hot food carriers, Princess Street, Port Glasgow, with 15 alone in one street where there used to be shops. So where did people find the money to buy this food for? You know, for this deprivation. And of course, that would cause some of the obesity we're seeing in the youngsters. If that's the kind of food we get access to. The booster of mental health and well-being, I think we have a solution there. And that's we need places. I'm only looking at Hub now, with Belvoir Gardens, Your Voice, all these things are doing a fantastic job. And maybe we should actually do a bit more and give them resources so they can do a bit more. Because that, to me, is a good way to help that. I like this, they wish you affordable actual to sustainable transport. What's the use of the bus pass if there's no bus? If the bus is off at 5 o'clock at night, and you're living in one of the outskirts of Inverclyde town, you can't in because you don't have a taxi fare. What's the use of a free bus pass if there's no bus? So there needs to be a conversation take place there with the transport people as well, to make sure if people want to get transport, it's available. And that's we're saying here, affordable transport, I think it's what I'm saying. And broaden access to digital health, I was like saying the idea, but didn't the report there, people were for lack of digital laptop. Well, you boys never were talking about the silver surfer and that. And a fantastic thing we had going for years when we brought so many people into that digital world. So I'm really disappointed it's disappeared again. I think it's when emphasis on that to re-engage with the new generation who we need to get into the digital network. So I know it's not good news, I know that, but I think there's small things there we can start with as a starting point and working on that. And I think it is a bad report as much as, you know, we are running a depressed era and there's no doubt about that. But at the end of the day, I've got to say it when I look at Heather and there's hope in this community as well. There's a lot of things going on in this community, and we have to emphasise that as well. it's not all doom and gloom. So I have to say thank you for the vote, because they're very eye-opening, and I think most of us would probably recognise the content of it. Alan Cowan.
I hate to come in up. I can shout. I hate to come in after the chair because you summarised it, but and many of the points that you've made, Chair, are the points I was going to make. First of all, thank you for the work you've done here for bringing it to us. It's really helpful. I think you can get lost in data, and actually the data is telling us, as we've heard, a story that we really know quite well. It may be pointing a difficult picture in some areas, but we kind of know what the story looks like over the last 10, 15, 20 years. So to that degree, it's not a new story, but it is helpful to get the evidence and a baseline and an understanding of it. I think there's two things, again, I think you could go through all, and I know that when you look at this over 6 HCPs and migrate it up to the board, health board in which I sit, you get a much richer and a grander understanding of what's going on in and around Glasgow. And somehow you've got to reduce it to something you can get your arms around and grasp with. And the two things that keep coming back, and every time I hear this, are the importance of early years as an intervention which provides a disproportionate benefit in the downstream years. So I think we mustn't ever lose sight of that, because sometimes we have to make choices about resources and budgets. And I think if it's about anything to do with early years, we should be stopping and saying, really, is this what we're expecting to do? So early years stands out for me. I think the other thing that stands out, it's not new and you'll know it, is the impact on outcomes of deprivation. We know that, but it continues to feature as the largest issue among many other difficult things. So I'm just inviting you, if you have to think about the totality of this, for me, early years seems to be the big prize, a big issue, and just the outcomes around folks living with deprivation is disproportionate to everything else. That seems to be a community that is, for what better term, is stuck and not going anywhere. I guess my final point that gets to the hope you've talked about is we haven't got to the next paper yet, but the next paper, and I was interested to hear that side comment between Kate and Beatrice, when Kate said, thank you for letting me see this in January. So I'm confident, and I've done a quick check anyway, that the 4 priorities that we have in the next plan broadly reflect 3 or 4 of the 9 priorities that you brought to us in public health. So if there's a confidence to be had in this, it's that systems and staff are talking, and that we're at least looking at the right things, drawing them through into our plans, and trying to hold ourselves accountable for the action. So for me, there's something a little bit positive there. I would have expected it, but it's nice to see it. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Alan. I'm sorry, Charlie. I'm sorry I missed you, Charlie. I'm sorry.
No problem, Chair. Thanks very much. It's difficult to follow yourself and Alan, who are very articulate and made really good points on this. The only thing that I'll add to that is that CVS Inverclyde, as the TSI, have undertaken to support the HSCP with the consultation and engagement across the community, and I agree with Lynn's comments about it can be quite depressing and put more of a toll on people when they receive this information. And all I would say is that in that approach, it's important that we ensure that we are non-judgmental and non-stigmatising in the way that we do that engagement. So that's something that we'll give some serious consideration to. I also wanted to mention that in relation to that early intervention and prevention, there's a lot of fantastic initiatives happening across the third sector in Inverclyde, and we'll continue to see more of that. And through the strategic plan and the consultation, I expect that more of that will develop as well. But also to point out that obviously the third sector are not immune to the budget cuts and the savings exercises at both local and national levels. So they too are feeling that difficulty in the years ahead. But yeah, that's pretty much the point that I was hoping to make today, is that yeah, we can do that in a sensitive way.
Thank you, Charlie. So, further comments? No. Thank you very much for your report. Really was okay. Right. Item number 7 is the strategic plan. And Kate's been fussing it.
Yeah, I'm just going to introduce it. And actually, some of the comments have already been made, so I did want to say, I'm just conscious today that we never sent the final copy of it, so I kind of emailed everyone, even though that we used the health and wellbeing, so we weren't that joined with Alan in terms of sending the papers out, because we were doing it to the very nth degree around getting the plan across the board. But it does reflect some of the key priorities, and that whilst that we have the 6 actions and they've served as well, I think that one of the things that we've recognised is like, what is the actual impact of all our activities? So this new plan is more impactful, and what we'll be able to do is measure and we're moving forward to develop priorities that we think that our partners, our staff, our community and our third sector would recognise. Can also thank our third sector who sit in our strategic planning group for that challenge back to us as well. Everyone knows that they probably had enough of me sitting in the room for 4 hours saying, so what does this look like? How does this read to you? Have we been ambitious enough? But ambition and how we might have perceived ambition before the pandemic is quite different from what the ambition now and was. That it might be perceived that MB's presentation is, depressing or whatever. I actually think that we're better dealing with what we know as what we don't know, and actually we've got a baseline to improve and where we want to go. So I actually think that the moons and the sun have been managing to get into the same universe over this one, because sometimes we could have been right now in a strategic plan last year without actually understanding the impact of our health and well-being on our citizens. So we got a lot of information. So I'm not going to say anything else. I'm just going to hand it over to Scott, who's going to take you through just a short overview and pick out the key highlights of where we think how to come to in some of the activities.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. Thanks very much for having me. And this is really to present the new strategic plan. It's a strategic partnership plan, which is effectively the new strategic commissioning plan for the Integration Joint Board. We've called it the strategic partnership plan because I think as we've had the discussions around the table today, is it's really key and it will be delivered by all the partners that they contribute to the Health and Social Care Partnership and the Integration Joint Board. So really looking to get approval from the IJB today to implement that, to publish the plan and implement it going forward for the next 3 years. So the new plan, we've called it People and Partnerships Making a Difference, which we hope is really underlines what the plan is hoping to do. So the plan is underpinned by its vision, which is effectively that Inverclyde is a compassionate community working together to ensure people live active, healthy and fulfilling lives. So with the publication of this plan, we're effectively retiring the previous plan that was published in 2019. So that effectively retires the previous 6 big actions in favour of the new 4 strategic priorities that we have. So I should highlight as well that this plan has been developed in partnership with our colleagues in the strategic planning group, with engaging closely with service areas within the HSCP and with local people and through our locality groups and through our partnership working with the third and independent sector. So the plan identifies our vision, our key ambitions for the next few years. So I think it's also worth highlighting that, especially in relation to the conversation that's taken place today, that we understand the breadth of the challenge that faces the health and well-being of people in Inverclyde, and that we're not going to sort it over the scope of a 3-year plan, but the ambitions that we have are beyond that. What we're hoping this plan will do is it basically takes those first steps, and that will get us on the first steps to improving those long-term health and well-being outcomes. So going forward, so basically what we've identified now is the new 4 strategic priorities for action. So they are to provide early help and intervention, improve support for mental health, well-being and recovery, support inclusive, safe and resilient communities, and strengthen support to families and carers. So just briefly, so in terms of provide early help and intervention, so that's effectively looking at that early intervention approach that we spoke about. That basically what we want to do is work with our partners to ensure that there are effective services in our communities for people who need them as soon as the need arises. So people are more informed of the services that are available to support them if they do have a health and well-being concern or even a social care concern, and they'll be able to access those services in a convenient place close to their own community. That's also building up that sort of health literacy, so where people are better understanding of their own conditions that they have and are more able to self-manage. And effectively, they'll not need to basically engage with statutory HSCP services until a much later stage. But when they do engage with HSCP services, they will be supported and guided to get to the right service as soon as possible, regardless of which door they walk on in the first place. There will be that no wrong door approach for people. In terms of the next priority, so improve support for mental health, wellbeing and recovery. This priority is really looking at some of the key challenges that we spoke about today already. So that's looking at the rise in mental health and wellbeing concerns among the local population. And it also looks to address and support the prevalence of harms from alcohol and drug use. So the actions in that are looking at how do we engage effectively with these communities, how do we ensure that they have access to the most appropriate support services available, and how do we work with our partners to commission new services to be available for community support the people affected within this priority. And what we're also reflecting here is that we're holistic and we're reflecting on what the social capital that these people will need, because we recognise if somebody isn't affected by a complex mental health condition or they are affected by the harms from alcohol and drug use, they will need that significant period of recovery, and we're hoping to be able to put those recovery networks in place. And again, they'll likely be community and family based. The next priority we're talking about is to support inclusive, safe and resilient communities. So that's ensuring that we support and work with our communities, engage with them and build on the assets that already exist there. So again, that goes back to working with our partners to ensure that there is a good level of information out in our communities. They know exactly where to turn to if they face a situation that they're unsure of. And we're building up that support in communities and hopefully building on local people's social capital and their trust in their neighbours and their local communities and networks. And finally, the priority and strength and support to families and carers. So again, this priority is really at the base of it is basically looking at that we understand that people live in warm, nurturing and supportive families or in households, then their health and wellbeing outcomes will be a lot stronger. So this priority is really looking at how do we support our carers and our families who face additional challenge to be able to continue in that role, to continue to have vibrant, supportive families. But I think we should also highlight on this, and I think it was touched earlier, this is, when we're talking about families, we're talking about that in the widest sense. We're not looking at young families, young children and families, we're looking at the wider family networks across Inverclyde as well. So hopefully that covers it for the 4 priorities that we have. But I think underlining and underpinning the whole plan is that need to address the significant inequalities that are in place in Inverclyde. And we hope through the delivery of these priorities we will do that. So in terms of our approach going forward, what we're looking to do is focus our resources where they are most needed. So where there is a community or there is a pocket of need, we will look at that, we'll consider that, and we will basically seek to support that. So ensuring the resources are set in the right place. We'll be looking to be more trauma-informed and person-centred in our approach. As we've said in the presentation from B, that a lot of people have mistrust in services and interest in accessing community support. So it's how do we build it up? How do we ensure that people feel safe and supported when they engage services with us? Another key approach is empowering those communities, so working with our community partners and our local partners to ensure that we have the right resources available and working in partnership as well. So in order to do all that and to ensure that we can effectively improve local health and wellbeing outcomes, we have a number of enablers under that. So again, we're looking to redesign the services within the partnership to ensure they meet the needs of local people. We'll undertake that engagement, as I think was discussed earlier on. Engaging with local people and getting their input and support and guidance is going to be really important in our service improvement going forward. We have our workforce plan, another key enabler is our workforce, working with our local partners. We do have our financial plan, so that's mentioned in here as well, and it should be highlighted that our financial plan is aligned to the actions that are against our strategic priorities. We have a quality outcomes plan. We're all looking at how we effectively commission in the future, and obviously we do have our housing contribution statement, which states how we work closely with our housing partners. So I think, so overall, yes, so we do have that. So we do believe that this plan is fairly clear in terms of how we want to step forward, how we want to address those significant inequalities and improve local health and wellbeing of local people. And it is also in alignment with the Alliance's local outcome improvement plan as well. And I think so, certainly going forward, we'll be seeking to update the IJB on a 6-monthly basis with those regular progress reports, just to ensure we have that focus on delivering this plan over the next 3 years. Hopefully that's okay. Happy to take any questions.
Charlie, is that Alex's hand? Charlie?
Sorry, it's a legacy hand, Chair. I'll lower that.
Right, thank you. Any questions?
Thank you. Thanks, Chair. Thanks for the work you've done in this. I can't let it go by without a question or comment. So these things take a lot of time and effort to get to this point. So thank you very much, Scott. And thanks for walking us through it. I've got a couple of, I guess, a question. it does say that we consulted with partners. Did the partners agree with this? Is there anything unique to their contribution that we might understand? So maybe just a quick comment on what the partners thought about it.
It might be helpful if we got that from the partners.
Okay.
The partners have been involved in the plan.
I'm thinking about the partnership, so I'm thinking of the health board and the local authority.
They haven't, it's not been there yet.
Okay, that was my question.
So it's
it out.
not been to the council or the health board.
Okay.
It's for the IGB first, but there was partners in the broadest sense.
Widest partners. Okay. So will it go to both of those?
Yes.
It will do. Thank you very much. I guess the other thing I might say is, and I've been involved in this for 7 or 8 years now, I'm glad we've moved away from a 5-year plan. A 5-year plan just gives when you're kicking the can down the road, there's a lot more road to kick it. So having a 3-year plan allows you to hold your feet a bit more to the fire about what you're trying to achieve. So I encourage that. Grateful that we've gone down that route. I guess the other thing was just an observation. I guess the test of how effective it can be will be, as Scott said, when they bring a report in 6 months' time. Once we see a little bit more evidence or data or outcome performance, I think we'll be better able as a board to be able to challenge you around things or seek further assurance or whatever. So I guess the test for us is to come back in 6 months' time with that first report and then make a judgment about whether it looks like it could be on track or there's anything we need to do in terms of resources, support to help you along. So those are my comments. Thank you very much.
Martin.
Thanks, Scott.
Thanks, Sean. Thanks for this. It's really, it's good. It's also good to be able to see it on one piece of paper like this. And I think the move from the big actions to the 4 priorities is a welcome one. Just a couple of things from you about where things sit that, I know we've discussed a lot in this board. So the first is around income maximisation work. So obviously we've got workers at the moment who work to help maximise people's incomes, and I noticed that sustainable employment and education is mentioned, but just where would kind of income maximisation fit within the plan is question 1. Question 2 is just around primary care. So similarly, where does the primary care transformation, all of that sit within this? Because just again, thinking about what we've just seen from the public health report and the significant reduction in trust around GP services and reliability, where would that be addressed? And the third is just around engagement. So how do we, when we consult on various elements of this or elements of the future plan, how do we better engage people? I know we've got the localities now operating, but it sometimes feels like these are incredibly important pieces of work, but we don't always get the level of public partner buy-in is good, but the level of public buy-in to understand what we're trying to achieve. Thanks.
I think it's okay if I could maybe refer the income maximisation question to one of my colleagues.
Yeah. So yes, income maximisation sits in early help, no front door, no integrated front door. So we've actually taken into consideration some of our savings work that we're going to have to do redesign. So we actually will be identifying the areas where we require that level of income maximisation in a much more targeted way than we have. So we'll move away from just us getting referrals in for us to be proactively targeting it. So that's where that would sit. So I envision that we'll be able to get that coverage much better in terms of our own priorities, because I don't actually think that I think we can do more in that area if we target our resources much more effectively. So that's where we are with that one. And so it would sit early help and early intervention. It would also sit in strengthening families, and it would also sit it would actually sit in 4 priorities, and that's a vision for our income maximisation, for it to be mirrored across the board within a bigger system.
So so thanks very much, Kate. So in terms of the next question in relation to primary care, so apologies if I've been skimmed through it. We do have a section on the relevant strategic plans or the other plans that will feed in that complement the overall strategic plan. And one of those is the primary care improvement plan. So that's referenced within the document. We will continue to work on that. I highlighted some of these there. So that should be feeding through here. But I believe that the actions we want will be picked up within that plan and reporting section.
Great.
Yeah, you're right in terms of these are all key elements of our strategic plan. In terms of primary care, see we continue on our media, social digital media campaigns about the whole wide aspects of primary care and how we access that, and the different options that are available, but also building on the really good work's been done with community link workers as well within the practices. Again, it's a key component of the jigsaw that we have, so we'll continue to develop that in line with the strategic plan.
We will also create outcome measures that are reflective of not necessarily one single source, but certainly the community link workers are really important around that early help and early intervention, no wrong door. So we'll be looking at making sure that we've got the reach. So we intend to look that up and bring it to the IGB. And my suggestion to the IGB is that we bring it to the audit committee as a first step before, because I think 6 months is too long for you to see the first iteration of the outcome thing.
And final question, so on engagement, yes, so absolutely. So I think one of our key focuses is on localities, but improving our engagement in that and growing those localities so that there is that wider representation on it. So currently they have been sort of based in some of the areas, but certainly going forward, we're hoping to move those locality meetings around each individual locality to attract more people, but certainly as they going forward. But as we go forward as well, we'll still maintain those strong key links with your voice and with CVS Inverclyde. When we have that need to engage maybe on a specific topic, we'll ensure that we're engaging their services and skills to engage in the appropriate place. But overall, yeah, I think one of the things we're really keen to do here is have that overall feedback and ensure that whenever we are doing anything, we are engaging with the public and getting that effective feedback going forward. What step we'll be taking in the next couple of months is I think we'll be looking to refresh our engagement, communication and participation strategy. So that's looking forward as well. So obviously looking at different approaches for that, whether that's physical face-to-face engagements or whether that's from digital engagements as well. So looking at that multi-tiered approach to gather feedback from people.
Great, thanks.
Well, thanks, Scott, for that. And of course, the truth is will be in 6 months' time, you know, because I've been quite vocal in the past, strategic plan and cut, copy, paste culture, you know, and nothing to be done. So I hope 6 months' time we can start seeing something happening and not just in a bit of paper. So I want to caution there. So we approve the state commission plan for 2004 to 2007.
Great.
Great. Then number 8 is IGB call to report. Go again.
Yep, that's right to me, thank you. Yeah, so thanks very much. Sorry, Alan, keeping it right. So this paper is to present 2 reports to IGB in relation to our equality, mainstreaming or equality outcomes reports. So we're basically asking IGB to approve for the publication of these 2 reports, and also for IGB to approve the new set of quality outcomes for implementation over the next 4 years. By doing this, brings us into line and keeps us compliant with the public safety quality duty. So it's highlighted, so there are effectively 4 reports. So one is our equality mainstreaming and outcomes report, looking at equality outcomes that were published originally in 2016. So there were 7 original equality outcomes published at that time. So the mainstreaming and equality outcomes report had an action plan that provides updates on how we progressed against all of those actions. So we've now looked and we've now progressed those actions and they'll now be closed off. With the new action plan that is within the new equality outcomes report. Some of the successes that have been taking place in the previous period about how we've actually mainstreamed our equality duties across the HSEP. So we have established an HSEP equality steering group, which is basically giving us that oversight of equalities practices and how we continue to mainstream within our day-to-day practice. We've established an equalities peer support network, so we're building up that capacity of local equality champions within the HSCP as well. We have improved our processes around equality impact assessments. So more of our process strategies and plans are now subject to quality impact assessments and are now being published on our HSCP website. And we've improved our working relationships in relation to equalities across our third and independent sector colleagues. So their membership on the HSCP Quality Steering Group, and they're active members within that. So I think that's all. And that's so that's the Quality Mainstreaming Report and Quality Outcomes Plan. So in publishing that, again, that ties off the previous quality outcomes and allows us to remain compliant with the public sector equality duty. What we have as well is we now have a new equality outcomes plan with a new suite of equality outcomes, and this will take us from 2024 to 2028, and again keeps us in line with the public sector equality duty. So the plan itself outlines, identifies 4 equality outcomes. So we should highlight as well that in 2022, I think it was, the Quality and Human Rights Commission undertook an audit of IGBs across Scotland to ensure compliance with the public sector equality duty. And it found that a number of IGBs weren't compliant, so they implemented a series of workshops for IGBs to effectively come up to code with the quality outcomes. And one of the things they had actually done a workshop on how to develop quality outcomes going forward, and they had identified that previously there was a criticism of how IGBs and other public bodies set out quality outcomes, and that was to say people are going too large and basically you don't need to have excessive quality outcomes, and then really what they're looking for is a number of really closely focused, tied into quality outcomes going forward. So what we've identified, we had 7 in the previous equality outcomes plan. We've now refined those down to 4 for the new equality outcomes plan. And what we have is, so our new equality outcomes is, our first equality outcome is around improving our knowledge and information around local population with protected characteristics. So I think that's really been an area of development we've had for some time. So we need to better understand our communities going forward. The second one is that children and young people who are at risk due to local inequalities are identified early and supported to achieve positive health outcomes. The third one is that Inverclyde's most vulnerable and often excluded people are supported to be active and respected members of their communities. And our fourth equality outcome is that people that are new to Scotland through resettlement or asylum who make Inverclyde their home will feel welcomed, are safe and are able to access the HSCP services that they need. Now, these have been developed in collaboration with the HSCP Equality Steering Group, and we have a supportive action plan around that, so we will be able to bring back reports on that on a regular basis to IGB. What we also have within that is we have also set out how we will continue to improve and mainstream the public sector equality duty in our day-to-day practice. So that's seeking to do improvements around how we can improve our equality impact assessment processes, raising awareness among staff in terms of the public sector equality duty and the various equality training resources that we have available. Looking at how we can continue to do commissioning work across the HSCP to ensure that the qualities work are considered across all our commissioning plans. Excuse me. For 1 second. Again, improving on our engagement activity and enhancing the role of our HSCP steering group and our HSCP peer equality network as well. So that's an example of how we'll continue to mainstream our equalities, public sector equality duty going forward. So happy to take any questions on that. Sorry, that was a bit of a ramble. Apologies.
No, I don't think that. Okay. Very important. Anyone, sorry.
I've just got a question.
Alan.
It's just whether we've got any action to the EHRC, or is that covered? So do we have to, is there anything we need to action with them? We're publishing the reports, we're correcting this, fixing it. Question is, do we owe them any actions because they were the people that put the thing on?
No, we just thank them for their help. And we put a draft report up before the 1st of April deadline that they felt was sufficient to meet the standing actions, but we were still developing some of the more granular detail that we went into about our own improvements. We also took part in a learning session with the HRC and they really helped us to rethink the narrative about what it looks like in a health and social care partnership. It's almost, I think that, in terms of the parent organisations or the partners, as you would call it, you tend to focus on where they sit in it, but you don't always understand that you've got a job to do as well. So we just thank you for it. And our feedback has been really quite instrumental in some of the things that we haven't realised some complexity.
So thank you. The only other thing I might observe is that in 3.2, I've seen this before, it does lay out the years when you have every second year, every fourth year. I think that would be, and I didn't, as a board member, I didn't know that when this came to the fore a few years ago. So I wonder if that might be helpful to place that on the rolling action list so that future board members, as we come and go, are reminded that in the future years, you might just put a year on it every 2 years for a progress report and outcomes. So that would be 26. If we just have the rolling action, it means that the assurance function that the board members have to perform is a little bit easier. We know it's coming up. You'll know it's coming up. I'll ask you offline, how's that going? So I think transparency around some of these dates makes the board members function a lot more effective. So I'll just throw that in there for someone to think about. I think that'd be helpful.
I think that's right.
There's only 2 or 3 of them. Maybe just happen to the rolling action list.
Okay.
Becky.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, thank you so much for this. Really helpful. I really welcome it and all the work that's gone into it. It was just a minor point on the Appendix D of both documents. The definition of sexual orientation needs updated because it seems to be the same as pregnancy and maternity. So just to highlight that before it's published. Thanks.
Thank you. Scott, good to wrote that one.
Yep.
I've got more questions on it before. So we kept recommendations for the content of the quality mainstream report from 2006 to 2024. For the content of the quality outcome plan for 2024-28 and approve the quality outcome plan for implementation by Inverclyde HSCP. Agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Maybe some more on this, Scott.
Yeah.
9 again, and it's the Inverclyde housing contribution statement. Scott.
So thanks very much again. This one's just for noting. So as part of our strategic commissioning plan, what we also have to do is we have to complete a housing contribution statement. So this effectively demonstrates our close relationship with housing strategy services and local housing services, and how we considered the local housing for people in the development of the strategic plan, and basically looking at how effectively housing solutions are important to improving health and wellbeing outcomes going forward. So the plan is highlighting a couple of key factors. So it's looking at, so it identifies close working relationships between the HSCP and the local housing strategy and local housing services, and that's set out. So shows the alignment between the new strategic commissioning plan that's just been approved and the new local housing strategy as well. So looking at the key outcomes within that, and identifies how they're aligned with each other. What it also includes, it also highlights the shared local governance that we have, how in terms of the local housing strategy and the relevant working groups for all that, there is strong representation from from the Health and Social Care Partnership on those groups, and also within our own governance groups, for example, in our strategic planning group and our locality planning groups, there is representation from housing services. So it really demonstrates those close working relationships within it. It also sets out the partnership budget that we have to support housing and homelessness factors going forward. And what's also included as well, it also sets out a key action plan for delivery going forward. Now, how this action plan was identified, it was identified as effectively an extract from the local housing strategy action plan. So particularly outcomes 2 and 3 within that local housing strategy. Now, those ones are really focused on aspects that focus on health and wellbeing and improvements to outcomes for local people. And the actions that we've taken from that are those that have been jointly developed between HSCP services and local housing services as well. So those, it's effectively just to highlight that this statement has now been put in place. It has been been reviewed by colleagues in Housing Services, and it was developed in partnership with colleagues from our local housing strategy services as well. So it's just really for noting for the IGB at this point. I'm happy to take any questions on it.
Thank you, Stevie.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Scott, for presenting that. I think that's a really helpful update. I think in previous years we had really long housing contribution statements and short action plans. This time we've got a nice short statement and a very, very detailed action plan, which I like. I'm looking at Alan. Alan and I are both going to be chairing, groups 2 and 3. There's a lot to be done. The things that need to be done, they have to be done really. The housing sector, or the housing providers in the area, provide a lot. They contribute a lot to health and social care agenda. But I don't think we're always aware or capture that. So I think it's really important that we work together to do that. The action plans are over, I think it's 3 years. Yeah, there's over 3 years. I think in some ways a lot of the things we were doing already, but this captures it, and it's making sure that we're working together in terms of housing strategy, health and social care colleagues and housing providers working on positive outcomes for people. And I think I like the statement, it's short and the plan is detailed. That's all I was going to say. There's no question in it, Scott. I just pleased with it. Thank you.
Thanks, Stephen.
Endorsement from what type homes there. Anybody else get any questions? No. Right, we just know the housing contribution. Thank you. Bob. Number 10 is the Chief Office report.
So it's a bit briefer because of the length of the agenda here today, which is quite substantial. So I'll just go through some of the standard items, which is our building charges. You can see that we're making steady progress in terms of our dealing with charges. We're starting to see our recruitment and retention, improving of our social care staff following the redesign, and we knew that it would take time, but actually our recent media campaigns and profiling has shown that in the last maybe 4 months, we've seen almost 24 more people into social care service. So we're really pleased at that, and that's reflected in our performance, which is probably one of the stronger HSCPs, our second strongest HSCP. Just to move on to the paper that we did last year, which was the Kin Care, at the request of the IGB, we wanted an update about the review. To say, I'm not saying that I'm disappointed about the Kin Care paper, but I am, okay, needless to say. So there's a combination of factors about how it was probably perceived at the very beginning, across the board, including our workforce. So we will continue to profile it, but when I've had discussions with our service managers about what has been some of the obstacles and the barriers, that there was an acknowledgement that the level of complexity around what these people are managing, our families are managing at this moment in time, is quite significant. So it's not that they're just wanting a wee bit of additionality to kind of make a difference to them. But again, I actually think that we have to understand a wee bit more about how do we do that assessment. So what has been is the take-up hasn't reflected the level of development, put it like this, over the scheme, but we do hope that it will improve. Just to go back on to our homelessness review, that we are really fortunate that we brought in an external, very experienced contractor from work for Glasgow City Council previously, to do an independent review about where we are. And actually we're starting to kind of push forward in terms of some of the thinking about how best we take forward that homelessness review and what is really our ambition. It's been a bit of a seesaw in terms of some of the theoretical thinking about what the homelessness service should look like. And he's been able to come in and challenge us to say, well, this is what we should be aiming for. So we do hope that by the IGB after the summer, that we will have a report with specific recommendations for the IGB. And he's working with our staff 2 days a week to try and deliver that. And finally, just that the next IGB, that the Chief Social Work Officer will take you through the presentation from the Care Inspectorate around mental health services and mental illness. As you know, that it was published on the 7th of May, and the inspection is out in the public domain. I don't intend to say anything about it apart from just to kind of recognise and thank all of the staff and the partners that have, and the IGB who've been involved in this inspection, and everybody intends to take us through the results from the inspection in June. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. Anybody questions for Kate on the report? Alan?
Get your money sorted. Kate, it's about Kincare. I'm trying to remember how much money we were given, and 50,000 sticks in my head.
Yeah.
So I'm too full confused. So most of that's still left.
Yeah.
So the question is there, do you have any latitude to do something different with that? Yeah, okay. Maybe
We would just absorb it into the normal budgets, and it comes under the framework of self-directed support services, so they don't really have to do anything with it. We still believe that it is a model that we need to encourage.
50k kicking around.
No more questions. Okay, right, great. Thank you very much for your report. We're now moving into a private session, so whoever